Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is our newest talk in our Lost and Found Agency series, which welcomes an artist, a researcher, curator, musician, etc., to deliver a talk of their choosing that we record and then upload onto our website later. Before we start this talk, we'd like to respectfully acknowledge the land on which we gather as the ancestral homelands of the Beothuk, whose culture has now been erased forever. We also acknowledge the island of Ukta-Humguk as the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq. And we acknowledge Labrador as the traditional and the ancestral homelands of the Innu of Nitasenin, the Inuit of Nunatsiavut, and the Inuit of Nunaktuavut. We recognize all First Peoples who are here before us, those who live with us now, and the 7 generations to come. Today's talk, as some of you will know, is titled One Island Through Another, and it will be delivered by Eli Kerr. Eli will reflect on the local specificities of 2 places, and will discuss how his time in residence on Fogo Island last fall put into perspective his curatorial activities on the island where he works and lives in Tiohtià, Montreal. Using the daily walk between the 2 buildings as a departure point, home and studio in Deep Bay, apartment and gallery in Plateau Mile-End, Eli will present his exhibition making practice and Parc Offsite, the curatorial office which he founded in the summer of 2020. Little short bit of information about Eli. Eli Kerr is a Canadian curator and writer based in Montreal, with an interest and a commitment to place, scale, and the histories of the site. He has spent the last 7 years in Montreal establishing independent contexts that explore ways to support artists through exhibition making, text, and organizing. So at this point, I will pass it over to you, Eli.
Well, great. Thank you, Michaela. Thank you for the welcome. And very nice to see some names here in the chat from all over, and old friends, family, and new friends. Older people too, I think, so that's really great. I prepared a few images today and a kind of casual plain speaking talk, I hope, about my time in Newfoundland and my life in Montreal and what I do, and how those 2 things have come into relation for me. But I just want to acknowledge that I myself am in Montreal, Tiohtià, in the Gongahaga Nation. As this talk is very much about site, it was important to acknowledge that as well. So I'm going to share some slides, and we chose this Zoom format as opposed to the other for its horizontality and that people can all see each other. And so please interject with questions whenever you want. This has potential to be an exciting platform, and it should be, so yeah, okay. This part's always tricky. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so in arranging the pictures, it's been really interesting the last few days. I've just been kind of going back and looking at pictures from Fogo Island, Deep Bay is the town that I was staying in. Just over the last few days preparing for this talk, finally looking at these pictures that I haven't looked at in about a few months. I got quite distracted at times just by kind of these vivid memories and the beauty of the things that I did record. But I just want to start with this kind of, for context, this is the image of the house that I stayed in for 6 weeks. The trail up that you can see there in the lower right hand. Can you see my mouse as well? Okay, great. I'm going to use that today. Yeah, so this trail is the trail directly to the studio. From what I came to really understand, and I was very happy with where I landed on Fogo, was that Deep Bay seemed to be a really kind of tucked away, small place where there was kind of oftentimes one could really be in a state of solitude, I guess. As you'll see, the walk right up these steps is directly to the studio. And this is basically the routine I established daily, was walking up to the studio. So I'm just going to play that, a video of the walk for those who have maybe not been or not there. So I was there in September last year. It was quite interesting arriving. I think I was the first resident, actually, Michaela, that FIA had hosted since COVID. I was originally supposed to go in 2018, and so when I was there was no other residents, and was quite aware of that kind of sensitivity to coming to a place from away, being the first person to come in. Yeah, so this is about it. It would take about a 10-minute walk to get from the house to the studio. There's these kind of modest, like these modulations between the incline, which but by the end of the trip, I kind of really knew this walk, sometimes doing it 4 times a day. Very much like understood the land that I was on, and it really helped a mental preparation for going up and sitting in the studio. I'm just going to let it play out. The studio, which I don't really have many photos of in this talk, but I can pull them up later, but became interesting to me because it's about the same size, like in this kind of rectangular 2-story form to where I'm sitting right now on Park Avenue in Montreal, in the space that I'm currently working out of, called Parc Offsite. And that's where I walk to every day from my house. So I just wanted to kind of juxtapose these 2 walks as a way of understanding each other. To be honest, working in these studios was quite difficult because, like, sometimes it would be like a shame to work on my computer in there, right? I ended up doing a lot of the same work I always do in Montreal. So just really kind of the banality of like working on a Word document on your laptop, and then you have this outside. So in terms of like what I accomplished while I was there, like I think deeper things, right? So it's hard to like quantify, but I just wanted to kind of give that for a mood, and then for contrast, what it's like here for those who might have never been here. So I live in the Plateau neighborhood of Montreal, which is kind of like this classic French-Canadian bohemian center of the city. And this was my walk this morning. We have churches everywhere. Unlike a big thing, I was thinking about the houses in Montreal today and how they're all connected. And this is a kind of form of, there's a form of connectivity and community that's expressed right in the architecture, that people live on top of each other, or you have an entire block of houses that are structurally connected. I always cut through the park on the way up Laurier and Saint-Joseph towards Mile-End. This is Parc Laurier. Things have just bursted into being here over the last few days. It's quite beautiful after the winter. There's almost no spring. It's just summer at this point. Some shots of the sort of like guerrilla information campaigns that climate change is something that is kind of on the back of my mind when I walk through these walks. This reads, housing is a right, not a commodity. Housing has become quite expensive here, like most Canadian cities, in the last like 3 years. Large city for cycling. This sign didn't read well. It's about 1,000 cyclists that have passed by 11 o'clock this morning. Then on there, I looked a bit closer, and I saw this sticker, and I think it kind of expresses some things that I personally feel about this island of Montreal, that it is distinct in stuck between many forms of nation, you know, as one within the context of truth and reconciliation, of course, another within the project of Quebec nationhood, and that of Canada. So this sign just reads, you know, neither Quebec, neither Montreal. I thought about pulling this slide, but this has been on my mind with a lot of the kind of political things that have been happening with the new bills by our provincial government. Stop for a coffee. That was really quick, so pass the slide. And this is a building that's been on my mind. That's really close. I'm getting really close to the gallery here. I'm on Fairmount Street in Park Avenue in Montreal, and this is a former synagogue. You see this? There's two levels of architecture here, and in the 1970s, a school, it was transformed into a school, and this new facade was put on. There used to be a really large, I just came across this historical photo, a really large Star of David here, about the size of this crest. And I walk past this building a few times a day, so I think it's a good indication of how histories are like suppressed or still present as society and the built environment changes. It's of special interest to me because the mural is by an artist from the 1940s named Georges Lauda, and he's the grandfather of a close friend of mine, an artist I work with, Jean-Francois Lauda, who's a local painter. So this is his grandfather's work. So yeah, I walk by this building and think about it all the time. And so now we've arrived. So this is the space that I've been working at for since June 2020, that I'll be talking about today. I'll try to speed things up. So this is where I'm sitting. So the building has actually been described like a boat, and I think this is kind of fitting. And I do see some architectural similarity between this building and the studio at Fogo, or the house that I was in as well. So I sit downstairs, and this is the front door here, and then there's the steps that lead up, and that mezzanine acts as a sort of stage, and that's where exhibition projects happen. I've been working with one artist at a time. And so I'm planning sequential solo exhibitions. And within that program, there are dialogues that emerge and unforeseen connections that happen between shows, not necessarily direct response. And yeah, this is the mode in which I'm interested in working in kind of these small capsule exhibitions. I sit here. There's enough distance from the door in terms of for social distancing as COVID has changed and is changing. So does my sort of the conduct around the gallery. Yeah, I included this picture. I don't like having pictures of myself, but I included this picture because of this low ceiling, and it really, again, to kind of illustrate the connection to the architecture in Fogo Island and this thinking about place. In the house, I also could like touch the ceiling, so I thought this was kind of a funny connection. So I'm just going to share some projects to kind of contextualize how I arrived at this current project, Parc Offsite, and working through thinking about exhibitions on a small scale. Between 2015 and 2019, I co-ran a project called Vidange. It was a collaborative project with a fellow curator named Daphne Boxer. Include this nice shot of an island, and street view will come in soon again. So we had I fell into curating by accident. We inherited this building somehow, like access to this building in 2015. Friends were running it as a sort of music and party venue and a library. And they'd invited me to organize an exhibition, and they were disbanding. And there was this question of what would happen with the building. I was, after organizing this first show, I figured let's keep going. I want to try to run a gallery here for an exhibition program. And I started working with Daphne, and we started programming shows. And all the shows that happened here would be kind of site-specific artist responses to the space. And so we almost, and both of us like continue to work as artist assistants actually for our like steady paid work. And it's really from that perspective of being an artist assistant that we both approach curating. So it's about supporting an artist and producing something that they haven't made before, and kind of in the doing that work in public, like making that work public. So this is kind of how I got hooked on making exhibitions. This was, we ran this project for about 4 years. So I'm gonna show you some of the late projects there. At the time, while we were in this building, we caught wind that next door, which had been a abattoir, was going to be demolished and turned into a Microsoft headquarters. So this was a a sort of shift beyond centuries, you know, from the 20th century to the 21st century. It was unfathomable that the tech could just roll into this heavy industrial area. Yeah, so this became the kind of the shadow in which we were making our work for the last 2 years of the project. And inevitably we started responding to that as things went. So here's just a video to like, this is what it was like in our last 2 years of working there. So that's the abattoir being torn down. And meanwhile, we are inside. Oh, wait, I'm going to get to it. I'm just going to show you a few things. That summer, we were preparing to work with Abbas Akavan on an exhibition that he was going to produce in situ at the space. This work had been on his mind, a work from the 70s by Montreal artist Pierre Tiohtià, where he took the cross of Mount Royal. At the center of Montreal, there's a mountain with a cross, and it is the highest point in the city. In fact, for many years, there was a rule that buildings cannot be built higher than the cross, which makes, you know, basically has all these implications that, you know, this Christian landmark is the highest point, right? And in '76, Tiohtià made a replica of the cross tipped, and this work was censored and taken down by City Hall. So we had many discussions. He was in the process of moving back to Montreal, where he lives now, and his show basically is like a kind of an ode to the city, and kind of this idea of like looking at the city with through new sightlines, and sightlines referring to the height of the buildings, perhaps. So I'm just going to play a video because his work is, I think, describes describes the show better than I can do. So while this is happening, the building next door has been torn down and is they're going to start construction. This text work, some of you might be familiar with this text works on roofs. I think this is maybe the third or fourth one he'd produced. This refers to the height of Mount Royal if the cross was removed. So in a way, articulating Tiohtià's gesture, this almost decapitation in another way.
Martinez, the wheelchair.
So this misting system would go off about every 10 minutes for about, a few years now. Okay, I don't really remember, but probably for about 45 seconds. Oh, I don't know how to get out of this section, sorry. Not here. Oh, sorry, just give me a minute, please. I'll, okay, sorry, that was just like, I've done a really good job of not being on Zoom for a while, so forgive me. Oh no, I'm locked in again, yeah. Oh, jeez. How do I do this? Yeah, so not the smoothest break that I wanted, but yeah, the show was kind of kinetic and alive in that way that I think this video is better than still photography. But this work with the boulder and coat and that became into a fountain started actually becoming like a living form in the show. There was like these small spider webs that would grow on it. The garage was so humid, and all these kind of bugs would start coming to the work. You know, it's kind of refreshing to make this sort of stuff without any sort of constraints you'd have working in a museum or something like that. You really appreciated that, but I kind of would understand these organisms coming to the work in relation to the audience and people, like, you know, people coming to the gallery to look at to look at this coat and rock. So just a few shots of the show. He worked through the existing architecture and took this window grill that was protecting to prevent you know, break-ins and unwanted trespassers. And he took it off and covered it in 24 karat gold leaf and put it back on the building as a way to sort of celebrate it and protect it, and to, you know, reposition the trespasser and the guest or the visitor, kind of in a classic way of his work, which I was really touched by this gesture. These glass pieces were found in an alleyway around the corner, which we got really lucky about that. So you see the cross coming in here, this kind of collage. So sorry, I need to speed it up a bit. So yeah, so we still had the garage for another year afterwards, but we finally got news that it would be our last spring in the spring of 2019, and we decided we had to figure out how to close the space, how to end the shows after 5 years, and we reached out to an artist who has become somewhat of a mentor to me, named Alan Belcher from Toronto. Alan spent much of his career out of Canada, working in New York in the 80s, running an amazing art gallery there called Nature Mort, and worked internationally in Germany as well. And I believe it would be in the late 80s, he was returning to Toronto, and he's known for this kind of work of merging photography and sculpture, which is quite there's many kind of iterations of this, contemporary forms of this, and I think he was really at the pioneer of that, at the forefront of that, sorry. And Alan produced this work called Condo 88, and in short, this is him with Condo 88 in 1988, the year I'm born, actually. And here is a better image of the work. And what it is these strips, of photographs that were laminated, and they're pictures of these buildings in Toronto, I believe, when they were going up, these harborfront buildings, these massive condos, which I think I've actually dated quite well. So Alan photographed those and made work out of them. So we asked Alan if we could reproduce the work for our final show, and a sort of nod to history repeating itself in a sense. But this is kind of a big intervention on his work, because he would never work with such materials like these older bricks, and we reprinted these at the university with the students for very little money. But the idea was that we would go, Daphne and I would go around the city and collect bricks from construction sites and places where cinder blocks were available, like reused cinder blocks. So we moved these blocks into the space, and Alan came down from Toronto and restacked this piece, and we taped the prints to it, and he called it Condo 88.9 for 2019, and this was the final show, and the show was called Condemned, and the idea was that we were going to walk away from the building with this work in it, which became kind of nice, because you can see in this photo actually quite well that the building itself is made of the same blocks that the work is made of. And what we're left with is just the photograph of the work. And that's kind of all we have of the garage and this kind of exhibition history that happened there at this point. Here's a kind of nice sequence of images. This is me looking through the glass to see if I can see the work. I can still see it, but then when I pull away, I can see the reflection. Then I only see this Microsoft building that's there now. So yeah, this was in September of 2019. At that point, I had moved to Toronto and to enroll in the graduate program at U of T for curatorial studies. And yeah, only 6 months later, COVID would hit, and I decided to come back to Montreal. And oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's quite nice. This is kind of what it looks like now. Yeah, and you can see Abbas's work there. Alan's work is inside. That building is up, and the neighborhood is forever changed. Yeah, so I came back to Montreal in June of 2020, and kind of just totally upended, like many people from the pandemic, and I felt a real urgency in finding new ways to work, yeah, here we are. So I found this location for rent in that summer, and took it immediately because I was familiar with it. Having spent many years in this neighborhood, I walked by this. I knew what it was. It's like I showed you, like a two kind of like a staged, a very small space. It's about 300 square feet with a mezzanine splitting, accounting for that. So I became interested in the context of COVID, as everything was going like virtual, but there was still this real urge to see art in person, and that was clearly going to continue. It was just a question of how and what the kind of ethics and protocol are, the conduct around that. So I started kind of conceiving of a program of showing one artist at a time with an audience of one person at a time. That's what the text is here. I was like, with only about one person at a time into the gallery. Yeah, so I'm just gonna roll through some slides of the shows and talk loosely about them, and we can talk more about that later. It's actually quite interesting that around this time, Abbas actually ended up being the first show, and he was working with a curator from New York and Istanbul named Mary Spirito, who runs a nonprofit called Proto Cinema. And Mary came up with this genius idea for an exhibition, and it really, I think we were both really feeling the same urgency, but she came up with this exhibition called A Few in Many Places, and it's a show that happened in it was a group show in 5 different cities at once. So with specific audiences and specific works. So there was a project in Montreal, which is the one I'm going to talk about. There was one in Istanbul, a performance in Philadelphia, a work in Beirut at a bakery, and another project in Berlin. And so all these projects were artists. The premise was that artists were going to work in their neighborhoods and do some sort of new work, and that and that all of these shows could kind of feed back into a central hub of a website or social media or a zine that Mary printed with so writers were each kind of put in dialogue with each artist, and they would produce a text, and this would come out in a zine and it'd be published each week at each site. So we were kind of all interconnected. I thought this was amazing. It really kind of solved a lot of issues, and this was on our mind at the time. How do we travel less? How do we have less of a material impact? Yeah, this was at the forefront of what she was doing, and it really kind of inspired me and helped me understand what I want from a curatorial practice. And I think that's to be stationary as opposed to being mobile, to be in one place for a while, and kind of respond to that space, respond to the artists and audiences that are here, and make a series of shows. So also, I really admired how his exhibition really spoke to the previous, the show at Vidange, which was a kind of, a gesture made towards the end of the space, and this one more towards the beginning. The green screen moving, kind of like almost moving blanket-like form that he made acted as a way to protect the gallery and kind of unfolds to its architecture. You see, try to speed up. He blocked off this window, and at night there was a projection, a video work that played from dusk till dawn, so sundown, sunrise. Just still from that, the word crickets would pulsate as a subtitle with no sound, and then a flower would talk about its nightmares, and so this played every night. it was a pretty strange debut, and yeah, it's kind of released the show I have up now, actually, the way the artist is using the architecture and video, so that's exciting. Yeah, I was really interested in this kind of idea of like a smaller space, and a way of how to create intensity as opposed to density, like to connect with people, yeah, in a more like intimate and meaningful way. So there's a few kind of examples of historical projects that I looked to. This gallery in Paris by the Italian art dealer Lucio Emilio, he would show one work at a time. Edward Stieglitz would also had a really small gallery, the American photographer. Yeah, that was also kind of based around this idea of the conversation and daily visit. Then there's the single picture gallery in Russia as well, where the emphasis is really on mediation. Visitors sign up and they spend up to an hour with one painting and looking at it in more cinematic context. So these projects were all quite inspiring to me, to think about how to shift away from the exhibition as an event to more of I don't know, I'm not an experience, but an encounter, yeah, I guess. So I experimented with this. We did an exhibition with Jean-Francois Lauda. I showed you his grandfather's painting earlier on the school. With this show, we didn't publish photos of the exhibition until it was over. So it was on for 1 month. And in my social media feeds and outreach and communications, just shared information about the artist's practice. And people came to the gallery with a freshened perspective, and the response to the work was really strong. Just kind of withholding images throughout the process. This is an artist, Maggie Hemel-Metzos, who showed work last summer. She's interested in these kind of forms from antiquity that stick through time now. So she was looking at Greek columns, figure forms like the caryatids, female figures who hold water in pots over their head. And all of these vases are borrowed, and the jack posts are rented. So they only become artworks in their moment of installation. This vase up here was actually the artist's mother's vase. So yeah, really interested to, so this show, for example, will be up for like 1 month, and it's really providing the context for heightened focus on one artist's work at a time. Maybe I might need to, I don't want to run up through all the time, but the most recent exhibition I did, I'll just finish with this one, was a show on the work of Gita Kaiserman, who was an artist from this neighborhood, born in 1923, from Romanian heritage. I think she's first generation Canadian. And she passed away in 2005. And I came into knowing about Gita's work because I read that she had a studio only down the street, like 2 blocks south from me, during the Second World War. And at the time, she was a young artist, and she was making anti-war paintings in the evening in her studio, and in the daytime, she had a job working in a munitions factory. And so she was a part of this, like for the war effort, of course. And she was a part of this group of artists known as the Jewish Artists in Montreal. And they were, I just found this history really interesting because it's, when most people think about the mainstream narratives in the 20th century art here, they think of abstract painting. And there's this whole kind of parallel school of activity of artists who were more socially engaged. So looking and making like social realist work. So I became quite interested in this school and Gita's work in particular. And I befriended her daughter. And we spoke for about 2 years. I originally wanted this show to be the third show at the space, but we had to wait for COVID to sort of be wait for a window, with the vaccination and whatnot. So the show really changed. The methodology was just about borrowing works from the artist's daughter. I could have got them from elsewhere, but I just wanted to really kind of understand the relationship between sorry, I just got a weird Zoom message here. Yeah, just understand kind of how works move through history, and we ended up showing really late works from Gita's life, works that people did not really understand, like associate with the kind of her catalog resume. So this is just a really interesting project, kind of working locally. It's my first time working with an artist who's not alive, and I learned a lot about that. And what it means to work with a living artist, and the need to sort of publish and keep records and whatnot. Yeah, but it was an exciting show because as it would go on, I would meet people from kind of up the street, artists who had never heard of her, but they would be, 25 years old and their studio is 2 blocks away. So just like Gita would have been, 60 years ago. So people were connecting on this level, and the gallery is really that place for these sort of encounters to happen. On this back wall, I would hang works chronologically and change them each week. So this work's from 1936 when she was 13 years old. And this is of Fletcher's Field, Jean Mont's Park, just south of here. So kind of really illustrating these like changes throughout her life by updating these works weekly. And I just have some images from the show. Yeah, so I think, yeah, in terms of, I mean, these are the slides I've prepared, but we have a bit of time left, so I don't know if you want to ask questions, or I can kind of open it up to more like Fogo specific stuff, if that's what people want to hear.
Or one of the things that actually I thought was really, well, that reminded me quite a lot of something that happened here on the island is, some people will know, there was, Abbas did an exhibition here in 2019 called A Script for an Island. And it's interesting just in terms of like the timing of that exhibition, in a similar way to how it was an interesting timing for Vidange and then like to Parc Offsite, because that was the last exhibition at the Fogo Island Gallery before the pandemic. And it took this really interesting, the exhibition itself was basically recreating a pond in the gallery. For some people will know, some people won't know, the Fogo Island Gallery finds itself in the Fogo Island Inn, which has very, particular kind of restraints around like what's possible and what's not possible, because at the same time as it's a gallery space, it's also, a luxury hotel. And there's this sort of relationship between like, the patrons of the inn and the people who visit the gallery and the community members, etc. But one of the things I found so interesting about it that reminds me a lot of the work at Vidange is how it's a water-based work. It took, I think, about like 10 different community members to come together to figure out how it would be possible to pump water into the gallery and out without causing, any kind of massive amounts of turmoil or like an accidental swimming pool, which would have been like disastrous. And at the end of the exhibition, it actually had to close, I think, a week or two early because mold had showed up in the wooden structure. And they, and there was all these concerns about like, the patrons of the inn and like these health concerns. So when you're talking about organisms, I thought that was kind of interesting because we literally had this like growth appear that then had this sort of element of maybe being like bad for one's health. Or, do you know what I mean? And this kind of like funny membrane that's sort of pushing, like the visitor and I guess like the work itself, like both living, right, and breathing in its own ways, which I found quite interesting. It's more of a statement than a question, but it reminded me a lot of how the work there would have worked, I guess, like logistically, and also the timing is so similar, right? Like around this pandemic event that seems to like stagnate this like pre and post time.
Yeah, 2019 is a strange one, I mean, I feel like I couldn't organize this talk without going back that like pre-pandemic in a sense. And I don't know how we can sort of so maybe it's healthy, but yeah, a lot of looking back at that stuff and even looking at Fogo 6 months ago. But yeah, I think that's what I learned there. I mean, in a sense was to just be kind of like, I don't know, I don't think I really illustrated that well, but the walk was really about like kind of going forward, right? Yeah, things go on in a sense, but yeah.
There's a question in the chat. Oh, sorry, that I'll just say out loud if that's easier.
Yeah, sure.
It's, how did your experience on Fogo Island feed your curatorial work? That's the first question.
How did it feed my curatorial work? I mean, that was an interesting thing. I mean, I kind of just knew where I belonged in a sense, and I had really understood. It was more affirming than like, that I learned something or gained an understanding. Anew. Like I could see people relate to where they were in a way that they, that I could relate to. I mean, I had this really interesting moment like where I sit here 3 days a week. It's really important for me that this space is not open by appointment. Like there's opening hours. So like that's the commitment that you're going to be here. So I'm very used to like sitting here and talking to people all day. And I love that. But and when I was up in the studio in Deep Bay, people would like wander up like 3 a day, right? And they always wanted to come in. I'm very happy to have them in. I met a couple who, or was it 3 people? They were from Montreal actually. And that day in Montreal, a show had opened at the space. Once they asked me what I was working on, I just kind of showed them pictures, and I was like, found myself in Newfoundland, but also like talking like discursively, we're in Montreal in a lot of ways, right? So yeah, I think that like, yeah, just I understood. Just being there gave me a sense of that like stability, or this like this, you know, I always understood curating as something, you know, there's so much literature around the globality of it, the travel involved and whatnot. And I kind of being there allowed me to think about like, what about being in one place and letting the world move around you in a sense? Maybe that's sufficient. So trying to do things on a more like citizen, like street level, right? And like, I don't know, even just like waving at my neighbors. But I do that here anyway, you know? But there's this kind of just like, yeah, I don't know, it gave me a lot of hope for, I mean, Montreal's a great place too, but just it gave me a lot of hope for just how community is resilient. And yeah, so it was nice.
Yeah, I think I'll mention really quickly before I read the next question, but Eli's neighbor here is also my neighbor, and asks actually quite frequently about how Eli is doing to me.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
The question is, can you describe your experience of change in your Montreal spaces versus change on Fogo Island?
Oh, I mean, I can't really, I mean, I wouldn't be able to speak to anything on Fogo to that degree. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that. I mean, what was interesting too is I realized that like the daily work was really the same. Like I spend my time sitting in a chair on a computer, right? So I think it was another thing in Fogo was like, don't do that. Like go out and see something new and get lost, and you know, also responding to the rhythms of the day. Like if the sun sets, like you're done, you know. So yeah.
It's interesting because it also reminds me of the ways that Parc Offsite is actually really, in some capacities, and in a way that's actually quite interesting, opposed to what Fogo Island Arts as a program basically does. Do you know? Like,
right.
It's a like, is it a hyper localized program? No, right? Like it's these artists, these international, not just international, but typically from away artists who come in, who do exhibitions here, etc. And many of them touch on themes that we're interested in, which can be quite wide ranging. but it's an interesting kind of like departure point, because a lot of the themes also come back to being like community and place and space, etc. But it's from a very different perspective, or like just from a different POV.
I'm actually hoping to work. I wanted to make a slide. I was going to ask people. I mean, I'm in a moment of maybe change with this project too. Like perhaps the next thing that is called for is to go radically international and start bringing, like, maybe this moment has passed. It was really driven through the need to kind of like do something community focused for 2 years, and you know, have us in this community kind of start talking to each other again, and convening, sharing work. But there is one show I really want to do with an artist who used to live, who's I'm quite close with. They used to live right above the space because it's part of an apartment building, right? So, but I wanted to do a slide about how local people work. Because like Gita Kaiserman, she had lived down the street from her studio, and then some of these other artists I showed you, they're only like a kilometer away, right? But yeah, I think like there's limits to how local you can get, maybe. Yeah. I see that Chantel had a question. I can't read that. Is everything can make an expression only brown to the protocol? Or is it your way as a curator going from one place to another and letting space you find guide you? Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with space. Like it starts with or just a question of where we are and what do we have to work with, perhaps. I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, I don't know how to start I mean, no, I do, but I'm just being ridiculous. But I don't often start like an exhibition proposal with a blank page or a concept or writing. It's really kind of thinking about something that's happened before or where we are. Thanks.
Hi, Eli and Michaela.
Nice to see you. How are you?
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna come on video. Yeah, so I wanted to ask a question because I was there for 4 weeks around the exact same time that you were there, and I was there with Michaela, and I got to know rather closely how the Fogo Island Arts worked. But one thing that I found really kind of impressive and interesting, especially at the time, because Michaela was putting on an exhibit of local work specifically, is how intensely I find Fogo Island Arts engages community members, not just from like keeping like the spaces open to community members, but rather like directly inviting and like having people come from the community to witness art and kind of bridging that divide. Because I don't want to generalize here, but the average Fogo Islander isn't necessarily the same as the average Venice Biennale kind of patron, right? And so I'm wondering if that kind of relationship kind of changed your thinking at all about not necessarily just being open to the community, but kind of working more directly with it. Because I find one thing that kind of gets me about art is sometimes it can be really, circular and based on, certain groups. And so kind of you're in a really interesting area in Montreal, and even Montreal more broadly outside of just off of Park Avenue, like there's many communities, and like if you have any plans to like engage broadly. That was
a lot of things there. I think that it's a really interesting dimension is that while I was there, I didn't really get the chance because of COVID, I'd say, that to and things were really becoming clear, and you're starting to meet people like right as you're leaving. It's always like that anywhere you go for a short amount of time. But that was quite interesting that at that time, Fogo Island Arts had a show of local artists, and Michaela and you hung that, right? So I got to meet a few of them, and that was exciting to see like this kind of group show. And like that's maybe one fault in the way I'm working is that like it's these solo shows, so it's yeah, but that was really exciting to see, like the group exhibition. But yeah, it was like really a big question of audience, like who is this for? Always, like it can. I have like existential problems with that all the time. I mean, the door is a real threshold. I've been here. I do my best to like. There's a sign on the door that says all like this is what this is. All are welcome. And I like as people get to know me, like the people that do know me that aren't necessarily an art audience will come in, but yeah, it's hard to have I'm not really sure how much this model works. And in terms of like what else how I plan to do kind of go beyond that, I have to be really careful because I'm in the process of sort of like when I'm here every day working on this and trying to make it work financially too, all of a sudden like it becomes more and more difficult to figure out other ways to do things, and you're not just kind of replicating models that already exist, So no, I'm kind of at a loss for that. I'm really hoping it can that it would. I am coming from a collaborative place where I worked before, and I'm kind of hoping that it could go back to that in a sense. Yeah, that this would just be an intermezzo or something. But the best I had a conversation with someone who visited the other day, and she was like the only person who came in on a rainy day and said, and we talked. She said she didn't go to art galleries often, and we talked about that, and it was like that was worth going in that day in a sense. And she really liked the show, and she's going to keep coming. So like, I don't know, the successes can be, kind of small sometimes, but really meaningful. There was some, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I could say really quickly, just to give a bit of context, the forecast, the exhibition, the community exhibition, we opened it in October of 2021, and it's like it's the first time that there's ever been a community show of work by local artists in the Fogo Island Gallery, and by local artists, we took in any artists who applied, who were based on either Fogo Island or Change Islands. When you take the ferry from Farewell to Fogo Island, you typically stop at Change Islands before, which is a much smaller community of about 250 people, but still 250 strong. And it was nice to have, I think, their work as well included in the show. But it was the first time that had ever kind of existed in the space, and I think it was a bit of a watershed moment for our organization as well, just in terms of thinking about the importance of that kind of show in that moment. And I think a lot of us were kind of not scared, but there were sort of considerations in place, and it was like 28 people, and most of whom have never showed in a gallery before. So it was a really interesting kind of opportunity that acted as a kind of almost to mend some relationships too, and to think about the importance of place, because what I said earlier sort of completely was in some ways counteracted that statement, which is true. That is an exhibition we've had that was incredibly interesting. Yeah. There's another question in the chat. It's, as a curator, how do you select artists to exhibit, and what is your process?
I think, yeah, that question, I mean, if I can just, I'll try to be transparent about that in a sense. I mean, I don't know if it's good to be asked that question to have to describe it, because it's so kind of intuitive and social to a large degree. I mean, these are often the people that I like, I don't know, work am with all the time, and you kind of fall in love with their ideas, and you want to, exchanges happen, it kind of comes out of a place of kind of creative exchange. But then sometimes it can happen through, like that Alan Belcher show, for example. I mean, we had worked on a show 4 years ago, 4 years before it happened. And in fact, the artist I'm talking about that I haven't mentioned that used to live upstairs from the gallery that I wanted to show with, they told me, oh, you need to meet this person, Alan, who's your father's age or whatever, right? But he's younger than me in many ways. So it starts, it's this kind of network that emerges of just sort of, similar trains of thought in a sense, and you follow that. And as things, and often, if you take on a show and you don't really know what's going to come out of it, it can also kind of feed back into that that knowledge that's being built in a sense, and it'll inform the next decision. Yeah, but I mean, it's something I'm feeling now is it's a project I really like to do, or maybe it's just a sort of a habit I need to develop. I was quite good at that in Fogo. I was developing a sort of daily routine, but is to do a lot more studio visits. I would love to be in a rhythm of doing kind of, take Tuesdays, for example, and just we're going to do 2 studio visits a day for the year. And then how do we, how do we do research, right? So I get kind of stuck between these phases of research, administration, and production of the program. Yeah. So I mean, I hope to keep reflecting on my process in a sense, and keep it moving and keep it changing. Yeah. And I saw someone asked a question earlier, because I think it's kind of related, with someone asked how do you make money as this? And I don't really know. It's pretty scary, to be honest with you, and kind of weird sometimes. But I've continued to work throughout the time. Currently, I'm working as an artist assistant a few days a week. This space, working from home was also and like, well, with no cafes, this was a real thing. During the early days of COVID, I would rent the space out the days I wasn't using it. So this was another way of like keeping it lean. Like I take a real pride in like figuring out like how can we like I'm coming from that ingenuity or that resourcefulness of being an artist assistant or an art handler that you know, try to make shows, how far can they go without spending any money, right? So yeah, but as I'm getting older, this is changing as well. So yeah, but I just want to like ignore that question because it's often like left to the wind. But a lot of, you know, arts like yeah, everyone's working on something on the side usually. Yeah.
It's not uncommon in this industry.
Yeah. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Eli. It's been amazing to listen to you talk about Parc Offsite, but also Vidange, and also your time here on Fogo Island. Yeah, it's been really incredible and super insightful.
Oh, thank you. It was like, it's, you know, it's been so great. Even like keeping in touch with you, like since being there has been so great. And yeah. Let's keep doing that.
I was trying to explain to someone recently, you know, for those of you who don't know, I'm sort of the program coordinator. So I live here on Fogo Island. And so artists come quite often, you become friends, close friends, neighbors in some instances. And then it's interesting because you get used to having people around and then obviously they leave. We just had someone here for 3 months who left last Saturday. And so they kind of become part of the fabric of your life. But there's this sort of revolving door, which is in some ways, you know, really incredible. We're so lucky to be able to live and work here and have people come and be interested and be so excited about coming here. But there's a lot of leaving and saying goodbye as well. But it's also lucky because we get to stay in touch in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's nice. And I was just saying that to Michaela, there's an artist that just finished the residency that I did not know personally, and I knew of their work, and they were coming through Montreal on their way back to Europe, and a mutual friend put us in touch, and we met. And so this is a kind of nice way to like, I don't know, I was just like, she showed me a picture, or she wasn't able to show me, but she would have seen an iceberg and I didn't. I was like, oh, you saw it, you show me pictures on my phone over there. But it was like weird, it's this kind of like fresh perspective and like sort of like a stop off point or something. And yeah, no, it's nice to like think about place that way. So yeah, thank you.
We've seen like only mini icebergs, unfortunately, like nothing grandiose, let's say, not necessarily a stage, but still exciting. All right, well, I think we'll leave it there. We do these talks about once a month, so watch this space for more information. Thank you everyone for attending, and thank you for all your super lovely and insightful questions.
And thank you everyone for coming. I'm so like, I look at these names, so happy, like very, very cool to see you all here. Thank you.
All right.
I'm going to see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.